Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast with PJ and Mike. Now find yourself a seat at their table.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast with PJ and Mike.
I'm Mike.
I'm PJ.
And today
we have a guest, and our guest is going to talk about traveling. Now, we haven't talked about traveling on the podcast before. There's a new topic that we're covering, and we're going to read the bio of our guest in just a moment. But before we start, I will say, traveling is my least favorite thing to do.
And we're talking to a person today who, this is her life, and today we're going to talk about the best and worst about traveling, the best and worst traveling destinations, experiencing different cultures as an American, and exploring the sides of countries that they don't want you to see. And to help us out, we're interviewing travel blogger and one of my dear best friends for 20 years probably, Tianna G. Welcome, Tianna.
Hi, I'm Tianna.
Perfect. So folks at home, let me tell you more about Tianna. So Tianna has a bachelor's degree in media and journalism. She's been traveling and writing about traveling for over 20 years. Her editorial focus is food and culture. She has over 60 countries under her belt. When she isn't traveling, she works full-time in the radio industry. She loves to read about politics and history, is a beer snob, and a stand-up comedy enthusiast. Wow.
I don't think I know how many countries there are in the world. Because if you would have said to me, how many countries are there? I'd have been like, I don't know, 75, 100. But if you've already been to 60 of them, that means you would have covered the entire globe if I was correct.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm not correct.
I think there's 197 countries Americans can go to, and then there's like 206 countries, and that doesn't count like things that are considered territories and stuff like that.
Right. Wow.
So there are countries we're just not allowed to go to?
Yeah, like an American passport can't get you into like Afghanistan or like for the longest time Cuba. There's some countries that get, sometimes it's because they're dangerous, sometimes it's because of our relationship with them that we're not allowed to go there. A lot of the Middle East.
Well, I hope you got Canada under your belt because it's not looking good.
Yeah.
I do have Canada under my belt.
And if you were looking to go to Ukraine, I don't know what's happening.
Probably not now. I'll have to wait. Usually it goes back around, like we used to not be able to go to Cuba. Now we can go to Cuba.
Right.
So maybe 20 years from now when all this gets cleared up, then I'll be able to go to Ukraine.
Soviet Union's looking for you. They're ready to accept all Americans at any time.
Just like we're willing to accept them by giving them gold cards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so folks at home, I just want to share, I met Tianna, I think I was 18 or 19, somewhere in that realm, and she always loved traveling, and since then, and we're going to get more into it, more of a background, but Tianna, I'm kind of curious, how did you get into traveling? I know that for all these years, and I still don't know these questions, so, how did you get, was your family into it, and, what was, your first, travel destination? I'll say out of the country, so how did it start? What was the origin story here?
My parents did not travel. Neither of them have passports, and they've never left the country. So it really wasn't from there. So I've always really been into history. And when I was in 8th grade, I started reading a lot about World War II. And that kind of what propelled me to start traveling. When I was in college, I started taking world crisis classes because I wanted to be a war reporter.
Yeah.
My first trip was to Italy. And it was when I was 17. It was this summer after senior year of high school. And I had incredibly bad culture shock while I was there. It was just an adjustment that I couldn't deal with. It was 3 weeks. I remember calling my mom, crying and asking her if I could come home. And she's like, I don't know, get on a plane. And I was like, I don't think that's how it works.
Did you go as a tour, in a tour group? Or with
No,
other
so
friends?
I went with a friend and his family, and we stayed for a while with his family, and nobody spoke English.
Oh, my God.
And so I was 17. I'd never been anywhere before. I didn't speak another language. It was just very overwhelming. Then, fast forward a few years later, 2 years later, I went on my next trip, and from there, I couldn't stop traveling. So I think sometimes you have to those are the growing pains of going to places that you've never been before, and Italy of all places, which is actually not that much of a culture shock. in the scheme of things.
Right, compared to, right.
Yeah, like now that I've been to Southeast Asia or the Middle East, and then you see that, like, those are totally out of your wheelhouse, and it's like you have to really get used to how things operate, where, like, Italy basically operates like America. Like, for all, you know, intents and purposes, it's a westernized country with the same amenities that we have. So I don't know what I was doing when I was 17, but now I'm fine with it.
Nothing makes me love America more than not being in America. And I've only left this country twice. And each time I was like, you know what? The USA, it really is the greatest country in the world. And you won't convince me otherwise.
You know, but I think that too, you know, obviously, like, I'm not a super necessarily, like, consider myself a patriotic person, I guess. But whenever I'm away and then I come back, I appreciate America more than I did when I'm here. And I critique it heavily.
You know what's so great about America, though?
What?
Everything. And when you go to other places and they're like, look, I've never been to some of these places, but I watch TV, I read, right? I've seen a Time magazine here and there, and there are people like shitting outside. And I'm gonna tell you what, I don't want to do that ever. I want indoor plumbing, I want indoor electric, I want amenities, I want air conditioner, I want 5 stars everywhere I go. So this is for me. When people travel, like the way you travel, we were talking a little bit before the camera started rolling. I could never.
So T, I guess to folks at home, you know, Tianna goes traveling by herself.
No.
Most of the time, I would say. I mean, she might, you know, I think you know, join up with other bloggers or, you know, tour groups. That's before. I guess that was before social media, really, or the beginnings of it, like, you know, when you were 19, somewhere around there, we started doing it solo. So,
well, I didn't start doing it solo.
Right.
I started with a friend, or whatever friend was available, and then as my friends slowly stopped being available, I was like, well, I want to go to these places, and, you know, we don't have that much time in the world. So I just started doing it on my own. The first time I went away alone, I wasn't even scared. I was just excited, I guess. It's a different experience to do things alone because it really, like, tests you and makes you learn who you are. You know, you have to occupy yourself. You have to either try to make friends or be completely fine dining alone. That's why a book is often my best friend when I travel. I always have one in my bag. So I'll sit at a bar with a book and, you know, eat my dinner. And but, you know, when you're traveling solo, it's a lot easier to make friends because other people are traveling solo. And when you're staying in places like hostels, it's a community for solo travelers. So you end up meeting a bunch of like-minded people. And I've made friends that I hang out with to this day from, you know, trips I've had from all over the world. One of my best friends, I just went to her wedding last year. She's from Italy. I met her in France, and we've been traveling together now for like a decade. So sometimes I do.
It's amazing.
Yeah, me and Mike are just shaking our heads. I don't know if you both saw us both at the same time. I'm like, no. But I don't know.
This is often the reaction I get from people, so it's not just you guys.
I felt like I've reached a point in my life. I don't want to meet anybody new. So like if I already know you, great, you've made it in.
Right, you made it to the inner circle.
You made it to the inner circle at this point. I can't imagine making a new friend. Like, I think which is really beautiful.
And
then a new friend that doesn't speak English. I don't think I can do it.
Most people in the world speak English, though. English is a universal language.
It's the language of business. But
so most people do speak it, actually, which in some ways is bad for Americans because it doesn't push us to learn anything new.
Which is great.
And most people in Europe speak multiple languages off the bat because your neighbors all don't speak the same language as you. And I do speak enough Spanish to get by in most places and to understand a little bit of, like, French and Italian and Romanian because the words are often similar, especially like when you're ordering food or something like that. But you'd be hard pressed to find somebody in the world now that doesn't speak English, even in the furthest reaches of the world. You know,
I think it's just amazing and beautiful. You know that, like, two souls from across the world, across oceans. Met each other in France, the city of love. I'm just saying, like, it's a really cool story. You know, your best friends. That's for a long time, though, now.
Yeah, it's for a long time. We've been to, like, over 10 countries together.
That's unbelievable.
You know, she had a 50-person wedding, and I was one of the people invited.
Right.
And it was in Spain, and she was marrying an Argentinian guy, so it's, like, a lot of diversity there as well. I think they had a sign up at their wedding, and it was, like, over 15 countries were represented, you know, at the wedding, which was really cool. But I think that's, like, why I travel, though, is you have a better understanding of not only who you are, but how the world works when you go out to these places. And I think it's also why I'm so interested in like politics and history, because a lot of what you learn from TV isn't accurate for what people are really like out in the world, and understanding the geopolitical landscape is a lot easier when you're out there and you're actually seeing what people are going through too. Mm-hmm. So that's why I like to write about it.
Yeah.
You have to be, I would imagine, like a well-adjusted person to do any of this. Because I think about myself and I'm just like, I couldn't do anything. Like, my wife was on vacation last week. She went to visit her family in Florida. And for like the last week, my mother had to feed me because I didn't know didn't know what to do with myself. So like I can't imagine just like, I'm gonna fly to some exotic land.
Yeah, to Morocco in 3 weeks.
Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah. Like
by myself.
The only thing I know about like Morocco is what they taught me in Epcot. So which was great. The restaurant Marrakesh was fantastic.
Yes, their food is great.
And I never need to go to real Morocco. Like I can't imagine. I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy. I think it's great for people that love it, but for me, I can't imagine.
Right. I think it's just that you guys really display like just things that turn you on differently. You know, like Tianna's the type of person. I'm just amazed. I'm a very anxious person.
Me too.
I don't know. I think I might beat you in that. But because of the amount of times I pee out of anxiety. But folks, Tianna will be like, oh yeah, I'm going to like Cambodia. I think it was this time. She went to Cambodia, and she goes, I'm getting there like on a Friday. I'm like, okay, well, where are you staying? Well, I haven't figured that out yet exactly. I'm like, what? For me, I gotta know where I'm going, how to get there, and she just arrives. I mean, like, she has, essentially, folks, she has no, like, thing booked. You have an idea where to go to stay, but you don't really have anything set in stone.
I mean, that's didn't Rambo go to Cambodia in one of those movies? Isn't that, like, what he did?
Yeah, probably, because it was during the Vietnam War.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you're gonna... Were you there with Rambo?
I think Tianna's a very good example of from the line from Rambo. In order to survive war, you got to become war. So she has adapted to adapting to these environments, whether it's hostels or whatever's.
Well, I used to be a little bit more fly by the seat of my pants when I was younger. Now, I mean, like, I get a lot of joy out of trip planning, so I will plan my friends' trips, and I will plan my own trips, and if I'm having a bad day, I plan a trip, and it makes me feel better. So I'm definitely like that meme where you book a plane ticket whenever anything happens to you, but... now I have I set everything up in advance, and it might not be months in advance. Like, I usually plan my trips like 1 month out. I'll have an idea. Like, I'm going to Morocco at the end of the month, but everything's not booked. But I am doing a tour partially, so I will be with other people on this trip that I don't know, because Morocco's a little hard for solo female travelers, and I've heard some negative things about going there on your own as a woman and just the way they treat people. So I just wanted to cover all my bases and make sure that I had a good trip instead of like feeling stressed, because sometimes when you plan your own stuff, it can be stressful. Yeah. Because you know, when you have to figure everything out on your own, it is a lot of work and can often lead to me being frustrated with myself when I'm away. So that's also why, like, over the years I've gotten better at pre-planning and making sure that I'm not doing stuff like that. But when you're younger and you just buy a plane ticket and you show up somewhere, and it also depends on the country. Like, it's very easy to wing it in countries like Europe.
Exactly. Switzerland, England,
You know, and it's way less easy to wing it in places like India or Morocco.
Right.
And I am a very organized person, so I do enjoy that part of the trip, is the planning part.
I can't go to Jersey.
PJ has a hard time traveling over a bridge.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta like... If I do, I'm like, oh no, I gotta go to Jersey. Which bridge should I take today? And it's over from there. I'm like, which one's gonna have more traffic? Or like, if I have to pick... Like, this is where I know I can't travel like this. Should I take the... It's a decision to take the upper level or the lower level of the Verrazano Bridge. It's a decision that I need to know well before I get to the last exit. Like, if I don't know which I'm doing before the forget about it sign shows up, I'm like, this is it. I don't know what to do now.
Then you're lost. You know, though,
and you're traveling to these places. Good for you. I can't do it.
I think, I always tell everybody this, because a lot of people say that kind of stuff to me, especially when it starts getting to more of the off the beaten track sort of places that I go. Like I'm going to Pakistan in June, and people are like, "What?"
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
But these are the places that I've already done a lot of Central Europe. So, I either continue to explore or I repeat, and I don't like repeating. But I always say to people, like, you have to start off slow. Like, you can't just like jump into India. You have to go to like England and Ireland, where it's like not the same as here, but similar enough where you don't feel pressure or anxiety, right? Everybody speaks the same language. Everything you kind of understand how everything works. And then you can like slowly advance. Like I went from Italy to, I went to Austria, and then Poland, and then started going to like Egypt and India and these harder places, and it's a slow progression into doing the the big leagues, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just like you said, like you're a fish out of water, right? But I guess you want to have those comforts, like you said, in terms of language, huge.
Yeah, language is probably the thing that scares people the most about going places, and I always assure people that it doesn't matter where you go, people speak English. I mean, I was in Cambodia and people spoke English. I was in India, everybody speaks English because they were ruled by the British for so long. So it's like you're hard pressed. Like I was in Kenya last year and everybody spoke English. Everybody speaks English in Africa. It's like people who live in tribal areas that don't even see people. There was always one person who would come out and greet us and speak to us and tell us stuff. So that part isn't as scary as I think it used to be, especially over the last 20 years with the internet. And with social media, people are learning the languages much quicker. And also other countries educate their kids better.
So everything that I know about anywhere else on the planet comes from pop culture.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
If I see a movie and it features another country, whatever happened in that movie, that's what's happening in that country. So I don't know, you watch like a movie that takes place in Africa, there's usually a lot of bad stuff happening.
Sure.
And so like that's my interpretation of what it would be like to go to Africa is I have to make sure that like
you don't die.
I don't die. Yeah. Like that's all
it's
it is.
Like blood diamonds and everything.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like Hotel Rwanda kind of stuff is you know what I mean?
Yes, and that is I think both. Every country has good and bad, right? Like America has good and bad. There are people who don't want to come here because of the gun violence, but like as an American, you're not necessarily seeing that every day, so it doesn't feel scary to you. So I think it's like it really is. It's both sides of that coin. Africa can be dangerous, but it doesn't mean it is always dangerous, right?
Right.
That was one of the things a lot of locals were saying to me. Like they were very welcoming in Kenya. Like I didn't know what I was getting into. It was a trip that I actually was more nervous about than I normally am when I travel. I'd never been to East Africa. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I'd been to Egypt and I'd been to South Africa, but honestly, those are nothing like the rest of the continent. And then when I got there, I was immediately fine. Like, the guy who picked me up, I ordered a
like an Uber?
pickup, instead of like getting an Uber or something, where I was like, what if this person kidnaps me? Which is obviously a thought that I always have as a woman when I'm traveling, not necessarily specific to Africa, but he was just immediately like, oh, you should go to this place. He was just like talking, being very friendly, and everybody I met was like that, and I was worried about walking around by myself, but I spent 2 days in Nairobi by myself and never got bothered. And of course they were like, it is dangerous. There are times of like civil unrest in Africa that, or specifically in Kenya, that you can't account for, but like the day-to-day is not as scary as the news makes it or as we make it, just because it's sort of something that's outside of our comfort zone. So I do understand what you're saying. Those places can be scary, and you do have to be careful. You can't just go somewhere and not know what's going on or understand like the culture, because that's another thing. Like, as a woman going to some of these countries, I have to cover up in a way that I don't have to cover up here. But you also just alleviate a lot of your issues if you follow the cultural standards of whatever country you're going to.
It makes a
PJ's
lot of
face
sense.
is like,
It makes a lot of sense.
You're
to what
worried
you're
about
saying.
I might get kidnapped going to Kenya. And I'm just like, what if I don't make it home from the supermarket today? What would I do?
But I also worry about that when I'm in New York City. To be honest, the two biggest times I felt unsafe when I was like out and about, one was in New York and one was in Paris.
Wow.
It's very rarely in these countries where people are like,
Well, I had some issues in Paris.
like it's very rarely the countries that people expect you to have issues in that you do, because traveling as much as I've just realized that most of the world just wants the same things, and that's just to be, safe and happy and feed their families, and nobody's really like out to get you when you go to these places where they kind of try to scare you into thinking.
I've left the country twice. I went to Canada.
Okay.
And I went to Toronto because I wanted to see the Hockey Hall of Fame. Big hockey fan.
I love Toronto. It's a great city.
Toronto was a great city. It set me up for failure because I had to get a passport at that time because we flew in and you still needed the passport to fly.
Yeah.
The little card, the special license doesn't help you. So we had to do that, and I felt like an adult. I had to take a passport picture for the first time in my life. We booked everything, and we flew in and we went to Toronto. And it was great. It was literally great. It was so easy. It was like walking around Manhattan. I felt very comfortable. We saw the Hockey Hall of Fame, which was great. There was just so much like bacon and maple syrup.
Canadian things.
And Canadian stuff. And generally, I love the Canadian people. They're fun. They're nice. They're kind. And it was great. So it set me up for failure. Because I was like, I could do international. I'm international. I'm worldly. I went to Canada, which is connected to where I live. So then I was like, well, let's be more adventurous. I'm a big Disney person. So we went to Disneyland Paris.
Okay.
Which was fun.
Yeah.
Learned something.
I've never been.
Learned something about things that I don't know if maybe it was just where I was.
Sure.
But it felt very much like outside of America, people just think we're the Wild West. Like, everyone's cowboys. Like, if you're America, you're Midwest cowboy, riding bulls and stuff. I'm like, that's not quite where my America is, but I'm comfortable with this because I do enjoy a good cowboy story.
Sure.
But the problem was when I left, and Mikey knows this story. I pack up, go to the airport. What is it? CDG, right?
Yeah. Charles de Gaulle.
So the whole time that we're in Paris, right, the news is all about the terrorists taking over the airport.
Okay.
And I'm like...
What year was this?
I don't remember. It was a couple years back. Now it was years back. And this is when I'm like, never leaving the country again. If it's not part of the continental United States. So I go. And I'm like, I don't know that there's going to be terrorism while I'm there. You just hope for the best.
Sure.
You see an Eiffel Tower. You see Disney speak French. It's a great time. You go to the Louvre, whatever. I go... Now I'm like, what happens if I can't fly back? But... Don't worry about these things. No, you don't worry about these things. No one worries. I worry. I go now. It's time to go home. I'm like, well, hopefully we can get to the airport because yesterday it was under siege. Today I'm flying home.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So we go to the airport. We check in. And we're just sitting down now. We're waiting. I speak no French. You tell me people speak English. They don't like me. I'm American. I think they purposely didn't speak English.
Oh, yeah. French are known for that. Yeah.
So I hear something on the PA system in the airport, which sounds very French, and then something that could pass for my name. And I'm like, clearly they didn't say my name. That's a French word. That sounds like my name.
Right.
Only explanation. I'm sitting with my wife. I'm like, hey, was that my name? She goes, I mean, it sounds like it. You can go up there and check. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait and just play this out. Then, again, I'm like, that one was my name. So we go up to the little, the counter at the airport, and they're like, oh, we don't need both of you. We just need him. You go back and wait for your flight. You come with me. I'm like, I come with you? I don't want it.
No.
So, no thanks. They take me into a room. They're like, you have to have a security check. And they put me in a room with 2 other people. And I'm freaking out.
Please remove your clothes.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, immediately, what do you need me to do? I'll do it. You want me to take my pants off? You want to make sure there's nothing in there? Go ahead. What do you want? Just please let me go back on the plane. They put us in there. They're like, you're here for a safety check, blah, 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 the whole thing. They're telling me this with a very heavy French accent. I don't know what's about to happen.
All right.
They leave us alone in the room. I'm like, was that the whole thing? Because I don't know what he said. Like, I think we got to wait. We're waiting, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm freaking out. Somebody else comes in. They take everything out of our bags. And when I tell you everything, I mean, that man had my underwear in his hand, and I was like, this is very, very frightening day for me. They take out the little, like, these things, and they wipe down the bag. I guess there's these wipes that make sure that your bag's not going to explode or whatever.
Yeah, it's testing for explosives.
Yeah, I'm like, there's nothing in there that's going to explode. But they test it all. Guy leaves again. That guy doesn't even speak to us. He just takes our shit out and leaves. Now I'm looking at the clock, literally like 10 minutes before my flight's about to take off at this point. I'm like, can I leave? He didn't say to leave. And there was 3 of us. One guy leaves. He's like, I'm not going to miss my flight. I'm leaving. And he just leaves. I'm like,
But did they have your luggage?
They left it in front of us.
Oh, they left it in front of you.
But unpacked still, just strewn about.
Sure.
Right.
So he packs it up and he leaves. And me and this other guy were like, I don't think I'm going to do that because I'm the one who's going to get caught. He's like,
Right.
Arrested, thrown into French jail.
Waiting. We see someone pass by the room, right? And we like, can you help us? He's like, I'll try and find a security guy. Because most people, like you said, did speak English. There was only a few that really were being, right? Now I'm looking at the clock and my flight's now 5 minutes away from taking off. My wife is on the plane. I see them boarding. From where I am, I could actually see them boarding.
Oh, jeez.
And I know my wife's been on the plane for a while. We fly first class because I'm bougie. And
wow.
So she's on the plane before anybody.
Right.
So I'm waiting. Finally, somebody comes back in. And they're like, why are you still here? I'm like, well, you put us here. That's why I'm still here. They're like, you can leave. So we pack everything up. And we're like running to our flights. We're not on the same flight, me and this guy. We're just in the same room.
Yeah.
And we're both running to try and make sure we catch it. I get to my plane. And they're like, ooh, we just made it. Because the door was like, I'm like, wait
scary.
for me. I want to go home. And I finally make it on the plane. And I sit down. I buckle. That thing is in the air. Like, we're flying. I was that close to being, like, stranded in France. And I looked at my wife when we got on the plane. I'm like, I am never leaving America again. I'm never doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here. I'm like, what do you do? Like, I'm running this in my mind as I'm sitting in the airport. I'm like, what do I do if I'm stranded in France?
Oh, they rebook you on a different flight.
What if I have to? Is it like The Terminal with Tom Hanks? Like, I live in an airport. Do they send me back out into? I'm French now. I've become a French citizen.
Well, they either detain you because they think you're actually doing something, or if you miss your flight, they just rebook you. I mean, I've had stuff like that happen.
I thought I was going to be stuck in France for the rest of my life.
I mean, it is nerve-wracking to have something like that happen to you, especially in a place where you're not 100% sure what's going on.
Right. So, which reminds me, because, Tianna, you said you started traveling by yourself, or whatever, traveling at age 19, right? So, if my calculations are correct, you've been traveling with 4 different presidents, right?
Yes.
You had Bush, you had Obama,
Biden,
and then Trump.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, being objective as possible, like, we go into a country, and I'm not talking, I guess maybe the touristy areas, but maybe like you said, you go on the outskirts of some of these countries. Do they treat you like any different? I mean, first of all, like, do they treat you any different or special or courteous if you're an American? And then depending on, keep it real, the presidents, right?
Yeah.
Or the country, our state of the country at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like, how are they receptive? Because I imagine if you go to maybe Pakistan, the Middle East during, like, the Bush years or right after 9/11, might be a little bit tense.
Yeah.
Or pandemic, tensions are high. So what's been your experience between all those presidencies? Like, is it any different, or is it
It's definitely different, because I wouldn't necessarily say that you get treated different, but people ask lots of questions, because America, everybody in the world knows what's going on in the U.S. We don't know what's going on in other countries. That makes
a lot of sense. We only have
most people, most people just have, like, if it's major and it's on the news, then they know, but they don't understand anything outside of that.
Right.
And so everybody knows our business. And so, there's a hugely different reaction depending on what's going on in the country or what is currently the climate. The president has a lot to do with that. I've seen.
So things are great right now if you travel.
Yeah, so things right now probably be really terrible. They were pretty terrible under Trump's first term. A lot of people across the world, especially in places like Europe, are like why is he your president, or something along those lines. And it's like, everybody votes differently. I did not vote for him, so I cannot currently explain to you why this is going on. But I also think it's like it's kind of like what you were saying before. People don't understand America and its vastness, right? We are cowboys and Confederate flags, but we are also New York City and progressivism. So it's like there's two different worlds there, and I probably have way more in common with somebody living in London than somebody I do who lives in like the middle of nowhere in Alabama. Right. So it's easy to look at America and not fully understand why this happened. And I think when you don't live here, it's even harder to understand, because you have a very different image of like America. So when Obama became president, it was a huge shift in the world where when you said you were from America, people were like, oh my God, I love your president. Da, 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 da. People were very excited when Obama became president. I was in South Africa in 2016, right after that election, right after Trump won. And I was in an Uber, and the Uber driver said to me, I watched your election, and I'm very worried because what happens in America echoes across the world. And South Africa was currently seeing this turn where they were kind of not going back towards apartheid, but kind of riling up race relations and saying that, people should stand up and they should take back what's theirs. And he was saying to me that he lived through apartheid and he didn't want to live through it again. And what he said obviously stuck with me, because here we are almost 10 years later and I'm still talking about it. But it's like, you don't even understand the cultural effect that America has on other countries and how much we kind of are the moral compass sometimes. Oh, yeah. So right now, what just happened this week is not great for Americans traveling abroad. I mean, I could honestly see some countries start, stopping us from coming in. And like we did the same thing, right? Like we had put a travel ban in Trump's first presidency on all of these Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with 9/11 or any sort of terrorist act that had happened, and then not put countries that had been part of terrorist organizations or acts on America on that list. And then they retaliated by saying we couldn't go in. So depending on where you are in the world, you could get vastly different reactions for being an American. Most of the time, I lead with, I'm from New York. And people are immediately like, okay, you're one of the good ones. Right. And the statistic is something like 80% of Americans don't even have passports. So the ones who are out there traveling are probably the more progressive, globalist people who have in mind, just an open-mindedness that people who don't think that way. They don't really travel as much. They don't really go outside of the U.S., I would say. And also, a lot of people can't obviously afford it. It is not always cheap and accessible to everybody. Living in New York makes it more accessible because we have 3 airports. We have less expensive flights because of that. And so it really does affect the way you can be treated. Or the biggest questions I get when I'm traveling are, about guns constantly, because most of the other countries don't have access to guns. Nobody owns guns. It's like the craziest thing they've ever heard in their lives that you could just go get a gun in the U.S. But I'm like, I'm from New York, so it's not that easy here. And that's probably number one. And then now it's always Trump, what do you think of Trump? What's going on with Trump? What do you think's going to happen next? And it's like, your guess is as good as mine.
Was it any different with Biden when you were traveling? I mean, granted, it might have been right after post-COVID. Some of you were even traveling that much or able to.
Yeah, I mean, I've been away a good enough amount under Biden, and it's just people are neutral. People weren't really worried. So the reaction to Biden outside of the Israel situation, the Israel-Palestine situation, he was less controversial. Sure. I've been to Israel. I've been to Palestine. So I.
It's just I feel like I can throw a dart on a map. It's I've been there. We've been to 60 countries.
Israel's actually where I got held for hours in the airport for questioning.
Oh, no.
And they took out all of my stuff, and they bomb swept it, and 3 different people came in the room and asked me the exact same question about places I'd been to. decades prior. Why did you go to Egypt? Who do you know in Egypt?
wow.
Why did
See,
you...
this, I
Yeah.
don't want this in my life.
Why did you go to Turkey? Who do you know in Turkey? It was like, I went to Egypt 10 years ago. This is a real slow burn on my terrorism. Like, you know.
Right.
And also, I'm leaving Israel. Isn't the time to ask me all these questions
When you're
I'm
coming in.
entering?
Right.
Like, if I was going to do something, I probably already did it. But I was worried because I had spent a couple of days in the West Bank and I had taken a lot of pictures.
Oh,
and
God.
when they were going through my computer and my camera, I was like, oh God, I hope this doesn't further cause me issues. And I didn't even tell them that I was there for a blogging conference because I figured that probably wouldn't go well for me, even though America pretty much funds Israel, so I don't understand the scrutiny. But I was flying a really weird flight path. I went from New York to Azerbaijan, and then...
I don't even know what that is. I don't even know. I can't even say that.
That's where Aladdin's castle and the palace is.
It's actually in the Caucasus, so it's right by Georgia and
know what that is.
Armenia.
Okay,
There you go.
And from Azerbaijan, my connecting flight was back to Israel, and they were just like, "Why did you choose this flight?" And I was like, "It was like $400 cheaper. Like it was
Right,
really,
yeah.
it had nothing to do with anything. Like I don't know anybody in Azerbaijan, and so that was like another issue when I was there." And then they let me go. But I almost missed my flight too. And I was a little stressed about that because I was like, oh, I could probably actually be held here. Like, you know, there's some... Like, in Europe, I wouldn't be as worried as I would be in some of the stricter countries. And Israel's definitely one of the strictest countries to come in and out of. For good reason. They do sit in a very volatile situation. But, yeah. I feel like that was probably the biggest thing for the Biden administration, and even that was like ramping up like towards the end of it, so it wasn't as big of an issue as it is, I think, now. Because I went to Jordan in November of 2023, and the Israeli conflict started in October. And I had booked this trip in September, and everybody's like, don't go. And I'm like, well, it's non-refundable, so unless something's happening in Jordan, I'm going to Jordan. And my mom was not happy about that. And then when I got there, it was like nothing was going on in Jordan at all. Like, besides for a large influx of Palestinian people coming in to get passports, because Israel doesn't allow Palestinians to have passports, so they actually have to go to places like Jordan or other countries to get it.
It just seems so difficult outside of America. It just seems so difficult to me.
Yeah, I think Tianna is like, in a way, what Americans used to be was like pioneers, you know, discovering different worlds. And now I think culturally, we're kind of, like you said, we are the best country in the world. And I say that in terms of like, keeping it straight, just keeping it straight in terms of, I just say things are organized. Well, we think they're pretty much organized.
Well, I wouldn't say that anymore, but...
Right, but I'm just saying, like, when we hear other countries and just, it's like, we don't know. We just don't know. That's the thing. And, like, Tianna's clearly out of her comfort zone. And at the same time, she's also in her comfort zone with being uncomfortable in different places.
Yeah,
I mean,
now my comfort zone is the whatever's outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I like to push myself every year to do something that kind of scares me.
Right.
So sometimes it's going to a far-flung destination. Sometimes it's just an activity that I wouldn't normally partake in.
So I have to ask this question. What country did you feel like, was there a moment where you were less like, ooh, I know you said getting maybe detained, but was there a situation maybe you're on a street corner or whatever at a restaurant, like, something might go sideways here, you know? Doesn't mean the whole country's bad, but
no,
was there a situation like, ugh?
I mean, there's been many situations throughout traveling that have kind of felt like that, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't say they happen so regularly. Obviously, if you're constantly having a bad time, you wouldn't be going anywhere, right?
Right.
There was a time in Cambodia that we were, like, surrounded by these kids with, like, weapons because we wouldn't buy their bracelets.
Lord. Yeah.
And,
This is why you need Rambo when you go to Cambodia. This is what I was saying.
Cambodian people are very lovely. That's not a jab at Cambodian people. Yeah, it was. We were in Sihanoukville, which is on the water. So it's kind of like a little bit of a resorty destination, and I use that term loosely. And the kids were selling bracelets by all the beach clubs.
Right.
And we bought bracelets from one kid and not another kid, and those kids followed us and surrounded us and took out sticks that had like nails in them and were basically like, you didn't buy our bracelets. And the one kid went to swing his stick at me, but they're very tiny. So I grabbed the stick out of his hand and then started brandishing the stick in front of all of them. And then they were like, give us back our stick. And I was like, no. And then we like ran away, but I still carried that stick just in case they came back after us. But these were like 11, 12-year-old kids, you know. And later I found out that like what had happened is there'd been a serious crackdown on child sex trafficking in Cambodia, and it had led a lot of the kids who were kind of living these rougher lifestyles to be forced to now sell bracelets or trinkets or other things like. And so those kids were a little bit more aggressive. They were a little bit, they've probably seen some things, and they often would react in like kind of threatening ways. Doesn't mean I wouldn't go back to Cambodia, but it wasn't a great time when I was there.
I remember, if I recall, I think you and Rachel, I think if you guys were, I think maybe it was like India, one of those. There were a lot of the kids always asked for pens. Is that, or does that ring a bell, or gum or something like that? Like
that makes sense. I the first time I went to India was like the Northern Triangle, and there's obviously a lot of poverty in India. And the kids would come up and they would ask for random stuff, and the thing is like you couldn't give any kid anything because then you would just get swarmed. And it's very hard to watch, you know, little kids ask for food or for a toy or want to give something to a kid, like a button, you know, like whatever on your backpack or something, and then you would just get like swarmed. And that could be bad because a lot of times they train the kids to be pickpockets or, you know, to rob you because people are less likely to worry about a child coming up to you than like an adult.
Well, I never trust a child.
I mean, no, I don't trust children either. I'm not a big fan of them, so I'd be the first one to be like, I don't think so, kid. But yeah, so like that kind of stuff definitely happens in countries where they have high poverty levels or where they're just not, they just operate very differently. I mean, there's a lot of people in India, so it's not all like that. And like I always say that like India is such a juxtaposition to itself. It's like there's extreme poverty and lots of like people in the streets, but then it's like a beautifully spiritual place that like really does make you feel connected to something else. And architecturally it's beautiful and the people are very friendly, and you know, so it really is interesting when you go to places like that are so different from each other. Yeah.
I think also I'm curious. I guess more on a more, I say, positive positive note. I think you see all the movies, right? Someone goes on a trip and they fall in love. You know, I think lots of these times you were single at the time and everything. Is that like the movies? Is there a sense of like, are people just more kind of vulnerable? Oh, the mannequin, all right. Like, an American woman, all right. Like, is it like that? Or no, I'm being serious. Like, is there like you know, some people get turned on. Like, if you go to Vegas, people are more likely to, like, make out, hook up, because everyone's in vacation mode. You know, you travel to New York City, you know, you're not there to, like, really hook up. You're there for some other kind of spectacle. You get what I'm saying? So, like, I'm saying you go with these places to have, you know, maybe more.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I never rule it out, but, no, I would definitely say that that's true. I think it's, like, your emotions are very much heightened when you're doing something new. So it's like adrenaline is going, you're experiencing maybe these very beautiful countries, and you're having fun, right? So I would say that like I fall in love every time I go away. And it's because you have like a very compact relationship, and you do a lot of things over a short span of time, and it makes it all feel very romantic. Yeah. You know, and I've had that happen a bunch.
I think like what they call it, like trauma bond.
Yeah, like a trauma bond, but like positively.
Yeah.
It's like a not trauma bond, but but exactly that, because like there's so many times where like I've been in a country, like okay, for example, when I was in Israel, actually, the first day I was there. The guy who was staying in the bunk underneath me, who was from Germany, thought I was drunk. I was not drunk. I was jet lagged. And I stumbled out of the top bunk, and he's like, "Are you okay? Do you need water?" And I'm like, "Who are you? Leave me alone. I'm fine. I just am like tired." And then he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And we started talking, and then we ended up spending 10 days together. And we did all of these incredible things that, like, you don't just, like, normally do with somebody, you know, going up and down the coast to Haifa. And then he came with me from Jerusalem from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and then we were like making shakshuka in the kitchen together, and like went shopping in the market, and like you don't do that as quickly when you meet somebody in real life, because you have work, you're maybe seeing them once or twice a week in the beginning or something like that, but then you're spending 10 intense days together doing something incredible, and then at the end you're like, oh, I'm in love with this person, but you're not. I mean, really. I mean, even though I feel like I take a little bit of everybody I meet from all over the world, and it helps shape who I am now and like how I think about things. But like that's just like a example of, and I wrote an article about it on my blog too, because it was at a time where I was going through something very heavy at home, and I think it was exactly what I needed to kind of like reset myself, and like it was just so pure, and there was no strings attached, and it was like really nice.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me because I try, and I'm hearing what you're saying, and then I in my mind try to put myself in a somewhat of a similar scenario. If I was in another country by myself and another human being came up to me at all and said hello.
And you would say no?
And I
You'd
would
be like,
say,
no thanks?
no thanks. We get to hello, and my immediate reaction is, no, I'm good. Nope, I don't want to talk to you. I want to be over here where you're not talking to me.
Well, your strengths lie in other places, I guess.
I mean, look, let's just think about this logically. The outside of, like, family, who I've known forever,
sure,
and I've said this on other episodes, the person that I spend most of the time with at this point, when we're doing because we're doing the podcast and all our other outside projects,
right. And your wife,
and well, she's my family.
Oh,
she's
true,
family.
true.
Yeah, it's the person that I've known since third grade. I haven't moved past third grade. You know what I mean? And,
old school.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to have to meet a new person and then like doing things with them in such a short amount of time. It takes me forever to even just like at work. If you're in an office, right? I used to work in an office. Now I have a comic book store, but I used to work in an office. A new person gets hired, right?
Yeah.
And now they're your coworker. It takes me months before we get past good morning.
I love new people. Like, part of the excitement of traveling for me is like, you have to talk to people. So
who wants to do that?
I mean, I love it. Obviously, we're very opposite on this.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I don't want to be bothered, and I like to go back to my room, or I like to go out to dinner by myself and just read my book and kind of absorb everything. But I've had some of the most amazing experiences with people that I've never seen again, just because we were in the right place at the right time. And, it also is, for me, like your world is so small, and it's not really until you start getting out there that you realize, like, how small you are in the grand scheme of things.
Oh, no, I feel like it's just too big. My world currently is too big.
I feel like it can't be big enough. I feel like the more we expand and the more we understand each other, the better off we'll be as a culture and society. And I think I understand the apprehension of not always wanting to meet new people, and especially if you're more of a introvert, then I'm very much an extrovert, and I steal my energy from other people. But for me, it's like, that's what makes life exciting, is that like everything can just be different the next day.
Oh, I don't want different. I want the same every day. I don't like being alone. I hate strangers. So I don't.
It's very hard. Yes.
So I don't know. I hear everything you're saying to me is, like I said, absolutely fascinating. But I don't know I do not understand how you could do it. I think about myself going to the airport,
and then
I'm just like, I have to be at the airport hours early.
I love the airport experience, honestly.
I hate it. I go through. If you don't have the, I forget what they call it, but like the speed check thing where you don't have to go through security.
Like either global or TSA pre-check.
Yeah. If you don't have that, and a lot of the times that comes with the first class ticket, which is another reason why I do it, because I don't. There's so many people on that line trying to get through, and then the minute I see the line, the first thing I say to myself is, well, I missed my flight. It's too busy. I'm never going to make it. This whole trip is ruined. We haven't gotten to the gate yet, and like, this whole trip is ruined. Look at how many people are here. I'm never going to make my flight on time.
That's so funny.
This is the immediate reaction that I have. And years ago, years and years and years ago. This is before I was even married. Years ago, my entire family went on a trip to Disney World together. And when I say my entire family, it was me, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my brother-in-law, their 2 kids.
Oh, wow, okay.
The whole world.
Right. Your whole world.
Right. Yeah, the whole world. Yeah, that's exactly it. And we get to the airport. Again, this is Disney. This is an hour-and-a-half flight. This should be nothing stressful. Should be easy, right? The most magical place on earth. We get to the airport. We drop off the luggage. You do the whole luggage thing. They give you your tags. You get through security. You get to the gate. We get to the gate. My father looks at the luggage tag, and he's just like, this says this is going, I forget where. It wasn't Florida. and immediately, I'm like, well, we have no clothes for the entire trip. My father, I guess, is also not a great traveler based on this experience, where he looks at my brother and just looks straight at him and goes, this is your fucking fault. To my brother. My brother's like, what did I do? And then he looks at me, my father. I'm the youngest of 3. He looks at me, his youngest son, and says, well, you're coming with me to figure this out. I'm like, I'm coming with you to figure this out?
You're like, Dad, it's worse for me than it is for you.
Yeah, I'm like, and we had to run through the whole airport. We had to go out of security. We had to find someone to tell them what happened, to find someone to fix it. They sent us somewhere, and they're like, oh, no, you're fine. These are just somebody else's luggage tags. We just gave you somebody else's stickers.
Oh, they accidentally picked up the wrong ones and handed them to you?
Yeah, that was it. That was the whole thing. That took years off of my life. And yeah, it was just like I don't do well in these situations. They have I love dogs. They have scary dogs in the airport, sniffing me, and then you can't. I don't know. Everything about the airport is scary and anxious, and I don't know how you do it.
I do it 10 times a year.
No,
she's unbelievable.
Too many times.
I was gonna say, I always love those memes where it's like when you're going through airport security, and it's like, all right, if you have any guns or anything, let us know. It's like, what if I do have a gun? It's like, I always have this irrational thing. I'm going through that machine. They go like, sir, get removed. I'm like, I don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any weapons on me. They somehow find someone playing. So I have
I'm always worried about that too.
Irrational feel.
I feel like I'm Wolverine when I go through the airport, because inevitably I will set off the alarm. I will have nothing in my pockets. I specifically, when I go to the airport, I wear nothing that has any metal. Not even a zipper. Like, I'm wearing track pants with, you know what I mean? Like, everything should be easy. And here's what happened the last time. I go through, I light up like fucking Luna Park. What happens to this guy? Why does he have so much metal? Sir, you got to come to the side. And they do they touch it. And they're like, we don't feel anything. I'm like, there's nothing to feel. And they're
so
like,
funny.
and then they go, boy, you sweating? I'm like, I'm 300 and something. Yeah, I'm sweating. I'm always sweating. I'm fat.
And you're nervous
and
now.
I'm very nervous. So yeah, they're like, well, it's probably just the sweat. You can go through. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't know if I'm sweating metal. But if it's just the sweat, how many people with a gun got through? Because they were
like, oh, I'm sweaty.
Just sweaty. And now for the entire... And then I get through the gate, and then I'm sitting, and I'm immediately eyeing up whoever I think is the one who's going to try and take me out on the plane. And by the way, I'm not profiling. It doesn't have to be someone that fits the stereotypical view of a terrorist.
You're just like, that's a shifty-looking person.
I'm just like, that person, I don't like the way they sit. And so they must be the problem. Yeah. They wouldn't have moved in that chair unless they were plotting on attacking me during an air...
Just you, specifically. Yeah. Not the whole plane.
Not the whole plane. They're coming after me. I don't like it.
You know, I do think that the more you travel, though, the less anxiety you get, because you have to keep doing something and get better at it.
Get the exposure, doing some exposure therapy.
Because now, I always say that I attribute travel to the reasons why I'm a much more patient person, and I think it's just because once you've been to, for me, as I started going to places and started to realize, all right, well, this isn't going to be fast like New York. You know, it's going to be slow. I'm going to be sitting in a traffic jam because there's a cow in the street for 2 hours in India because they won't move them. And you just have to
I just can't do that.
You just have to go with the flow, and but it's helped me in my regular life. I'm less I get less fussed about things because I feel like I'm this was harder, or that's how this is today, and it helps me stop being so anxious about things. I
get angry in less than a second. It doesn't take long, and so when you say I have to wait for a cow to cross the street, the minute we stopped driving, I'm like, what the fuck? Come on, drive around it then. You don't want to
Yeah.
move it, drive around it.
No,
like,
they won't do it.
I don't have the patience to deal with the other
Right.
like reality of the world.
Maybe you should stay
Right.
home then.
I stay home. I don't want to go
I think
anywhere.
it goes to what, and I actually have as we're winding down, I have a little rapid fire for you that,
Okay. Woo.
I did on the fly, but let me throw some of my therapy stuff in here.
Okay.
What I'm hearing is
PJ needs therapy. And
Yeah. He's done that for a long time. We didn't just get to that
What I'm
revelation
hearing
today.
is I think a lot of people is like you said, leaving your comfort zone is difficult for people, you know, and I think part of that is like they call it either rejecting reality or accepting reality.
Yeah.
And when we're able to accept reality, we can actually get over something or
Yes.
survive it, you know?
Yeah,
Instead of
yeah.
that fight or flight, they call it rest and digest. But Tianna, I have these rapid fire questions I just wrote on the fly. They're just
Okay.
kind of 1 or 2 word answers or a sentence, okay? So, answer to the best of your ability. Best hotel that you stayed at in any country that you can recall.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Best hotel? That's so hard. I stayed on a houseboat in India that was incredible. It was a very cool experience, and they had like a chef in house to make you food, and your little rooms were so cute. And then you just like sailed around in the backwaters of Kerala. So I guess that was
Okay.
cool.
Wow. Okay. How about best hostel?
I know I have to think about that.
It just sounds like every experience in a hostel is a horror movie to me.
Hostels are not like Hostel the movie,
Okay.
just so you know. I'm trying to think of a cool one that I stayed in that had like special amenities or something like that, but it escapes me at the moment. But I'll try to keep thinking about
That's
it.
okay. How about, is there a country that you enjoy but you don't really have once is enough, like you're not turned on to go back again? I don't like to do repeaters, but it's definitely one you would definitely not repeat. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I've repeated a lot of countries. So even though I've been to like 60-ish, I've been away a lot more than that. So even though I say that, I still do it. I guess I'm trying to think. There's so the only place that I've ever been that I was kind of like, was Egypt. I didn't have like a good time in Egypt, but I think it was the trip I was on and also just the newness of travel to me at the time. So I actually want to go back and redo it so I don't have that idea. Otherwise, I feel like everywhere I go is my new favorite place. Like,
Gotcha.
that's my problem. People are like, where do you love to travel? And I'm like, always naming the last place I've been, because unless I had a bad time, but I can't even remember the last time I had a bad time on a trip that made me not want to go back there.
Right. Okay, cool. When were you the worst jet lagged? Like when it was like, ugh, like it was bad.
For me, coming home is often worse than wherever I'm going, but Egypt was one of those trips where I could not adjust to the time change, and I think that led to me not enjoying my trip because
Sure.
I kept falling asleep in the middle of the day. I could not catch up. When I returned home from Alaska last year, I could not go to bed. I was up every day. I was up till 3 a.m. and then having to get up at 7 for work, and I just never adjusted, and it was the worst.
Favorite souvenir from any country?
That's so. Now I'm thinking. I usually will take home bookmarks from countries, or I have a lot of scarves from different countries. I think this one's from Africa, actually. And I would say I have this hand-painted bookmark that I got in Italy 2 years ago that's really amazing. And I just picked up a hand-painted print in Arizona of cactuses that I really love too. So I try to decorate my walls with random stuff from other countries.
Yeah.
This question might be on your list also, but I have one. What was the best meal you've had?
It
had to be on your list, but I was very curious.
That's incredibly hard because I write about food, so I'm constantly eating amazing things. But I was in Georgia last year, at the beginning of the year, the country, not the state. And most people are like, you're going to Savannah? And I'm like, no, bro. And we did, I got invited to this specialty dinner, and it was like 10 courses, and it was probably the most amazing food that I've ever had. Georgia's cuisine is amazing, and it should be more popular than it is.
Wow. What country is like what movie's very accurate of a country, like its portrayal?
I mean, Slumdog Millionaire is very accurate towards India's. And people say that all the time, but it is true.
Never seen it. I can't sit through it.
Dude.
I tried it. Didn't care.
Really?
It's very good. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It wasn't enough America-centric for me.
Right, so Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, man? I mean,
Yeah. That's pretty American,
That's pretty-
actually.
I know.
I feel like every movie ever made about Italy is very accurate about how it is. It is so dreamy. Oh, that's another thing. I did a cooking class in Italy when I went a couple years ago in the mountains of the Amalfi Coast, and that was some of the best food that I've ever had. And I know we kind of cooked it ourselves, but that was all that cooking school, and it was unlimited wine, so also maybe that clouds my memory of how good it was, because we were very drunk at the end.
Yeah. This is just kind of rapid fire, so just one word answers. Okay. Favorite European country? You're allowed to change this in the future, but currently, right now.
I always say Germany, but also I really love Latvia.
Okay. How about in Africa?
Well, I haven't been to that many countries in Africa, but I would say that now Kenya is my favorite.
I guess Asian, all those areas.
I really love Vietnam.
Unbelievable.
I've been twice. I really love it.
That's amazing. What about South America? What about that continent?
I haven't been to too many South American countries, but I also really love. I love Colombia.
Okay.
The food. Just for the food.
How about we'll keep it in our country. What about your favorite state or favorites?
My favorite state. Well, New York State.
Right.
I love New Orleans. I know that's not a state, but it is one of my favorite cities to go to. And I do think that New Mexico is one of the most beautiful states and one of the most slept on states.
And that's where the aliens are.
And that is where all the
and
aliens are.
Breaking Bad takes place there too, right?
Yeah. And the landscapes in New Mexico look like paintings. But Alaska I went to last year, and that was incredible. Like, the landscapes and the views in Alaska are probably some of the most amazing in the world.
Wow.
All right, so hearing all of my anxiety about all this world travel, if you had to pick one country that you'd be like, you could go to this one and you would do well there and you would enjoy it, what country do you think I should go to?
I would say that you could probably go to Costa Rica or Ireland.
Okay.
Ireland, because they speak English, obviously, and you kind of get the pub life. I feel like you would like the pub life.
That makes sense.
Irish people are very friendly. They'll welcome you into their fold. They'll just show you
I
things.
was just about to ask you because they say, I was going to say, what country was the nicest to Americans? And they say in polls that Ireland's the nicest is to Americans. So I'm just curious if you agree with that or you think
I think Ireland, since I only have the experience of being an American when I go places, Ireland is, like I said, Costa Rica is super friendly towards Americans too.
There are dinosaurs there.
Yeah, and there are.
Yes, right off the coast is the island of Guam, and that's where.
Yeah, they have digs there and
that's
stuff.
That's where John Hammond built the Jurassic Park. I can't go to Costa Rica.
I actually went to
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Site A and B. Okay.
I went to an active dig when I was in Washington, and they were digging up a woolly mammoth that they had found, and I went to the dig site, which was really cool.
See, that I would do.
Yeah,
I would like to find a dinosaur.
PJs and khakis.
They have them in Argentina as well. But Costa Rica is very friendly.
But then I won't understand what the dinosaurs are saying because they'll be speaking some sort of Spanish.
Yeah, they probably would be speaking Spanish. But in Costa Rica, they speak a lot of English.
Yeah?
Also, Costa Rica doesn't have a military, and they put all their funding into education. So it's like just a really safe and easy country to navigate. I spent 5 weeks there during the pandemic, and it was amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
I worked remotely at a yoga retreat.
I just have two more, Tianna.
Okay.
This one's you have to take your time machine. So Tianna and I went to the same bachelor's degree. We got at SUNY Westbury,
That's
and during that time, there was something happening, and you wore a T-shirt. I'm trying to. You wore a T-shirt. It was political. There was a country.
Oh, Saved Our Fur?
Yes. You remember? Yeah.
Of course I remember
Yeah,
that.
that was a big deal. People forget. I think it's kind of forgotten now with within time, but that was a big deal. Saved up
Something's
for it,
happening every day now, so it's hard to remember what happened 20 years ago.
Wow, you remembered. All
yeah,
right.
that was like my first foray into like really being politically involved too.
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm very politically active, and I incorporate that into my travel as well. So, but yeah, that was like my big. That was like the big thing back then.
Right, and then the last thing is, because you travel so much, this might help PJ and I, because I think I definitely tend to overpack. I think she's a light packer.
I am a light packer,
which is amazing. But what are the essentials? What are the ones that you recommend every person should always have? What's the must-have travel items?
I think that you should have packing cubes, because it condenses everything and it compartmentalizes everything, so maybe packing will feel less overwhelming if you're just filling these cubes. I feel like less is more. Like, you know, if I'm going away for 3 weeks or I'm going away for 1 week, I bring the same amount of clothes. And I just rewear everything. And I bring things that are versatile. I mean, obviously it's a little bit different for you guys because you're probably not going to be wearing dresses. But, like, I'll bring 3 dresses and, like, 1 pair of leggings and, like, 4 shirts and, like, 2 bottoms that can be switched on and off, and then I just rotate everything.
I go on vacation. Whatever I wear, I have to only wear once because I will sweat right through it, and then it's gross.
Right.
And I'm not doing laundry on vacation.
Well, I think, like, if you're going away for a week to a vacation, then it's different than, like, when I'm going away. Like, I went to... I did 2 weeks.
Right, if you're in Vietnam or something like that, you can't
it's
be
different.
traveling like around with
It's a
luggage.
backpack, and then when you're carrying a backpack in countries, you learn very quickly how much stuff you don't want to carry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And obviously, my travel style has changed considerably now that I'm in my 40s. But I mean, I went to Kenya for 2 weeks, and it was a camping trip. So I was rewearing everything, and we were sleeping in tents, and, you know...
Right.
Sounds like a terrible experience.
So it was like, it's easier to just take a few essential things, maybe like if you're going somewhere, 1 sweater that you can pull over things, or, you know, shoes, like, I know, like, especially for girls, that's hard.
To make that, if I'm going away for whatever many days
I
there
do
are.
the same thing. You bring enough so in case you shit your pants every day.
Well, if I go away for 3 weeks, I'll bring 3 weeks worth of underwear, but I won't bring 3 weeks worth of clothing. Because I don't think it's a big deal to wear a sweater twice or something when I'm traveling.
Of course.
Plus, a lot of places, like you said, even though you don't want to do it, a lot of places have laundry. So if I really needed to, I've washed things in sinks before. I mean, I'm not as rustic as I used to be, don't get me wrong. I'm staying a lot more in like hotels now or private hostel rooms, not like dormitories. But like for me, because I travel so much, I can't always be spending a lot of money on my hotels or things like that, or I wouldn't be able to go away as much. And for me, it's about, you know...
For me, it's all, if I need in my life comfort.
Sure, yeah.
And if I'm the slightest bit uncomfortable, not only is my day ruined, but the day of anyone who has to interact with me is also ruined.
But I think the difference is like when you... Because
I'm high maintenance is the difference.
Yes. But like not even just that. It's like when you only have like 2 or 3 weeks worth of vacation a year, of course you want those days to be comfortable and you want to feel like you're relaxing and not like roughing it. But like I go away monthly. So for me, I think it's a different association with travel.
I shower 4 to 5 times a day.
I shower like once every 3 days.
I'm just trying to explain how comfortable I need to be in my daily life. So imagine me being already uncomfortable in a fish out of water scenario.
I think I'm pretty easygoing too. That's the thing. I'm very like travel ready now after all these years.
Oh yes,
but this is 25 years of experience of like you know figuring this out. I mean, like I'm going to Morocco. I'm not staying in hostels. I'm staying in like 3-4 star hotels. I'm going on a organized trip with Intrepid. Shout out to Intrepid. I love them. But I think it's also just a different mentality because, you know, a lot of people who only have a short amount of time to go on trips, of course they want it to be more comfortable too. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like different. When you're traveling for a living or you're traveling constantly, I know a lot of high maintenance travel bloggers who are only doing luxury stuff, you know.
That's all I would do.
So, you know, it's not that weird that you want to do that. I want to do as much as possible for as long as I can, and if that means that I spend $50 on a hostel room opposed to spending $200, then I do it. But that's because I'm going away every other month and you're going away 2-3 times
Right.
a year. So I do think that's the difference. Like, you have to understand yourself, your travel style, and what your expectations are for trips, right? And if you know yourself and that's what you need, at least you're not bringing misery onto everybody around you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
If
you know
would
yourself.
Hate, like, if you would hate it if I was like, I'm going to go on that trip with you, and we went, you would hate that. You could never deal with it.
Well, you know, as a person who travels solo so much, it's often hard for me to travel with other people
I can
in general,
imagine.
even
That
if they're
makes
the
sense.
best travelers, because once you start doing things by yourself all the time, it's like hard to then like acclimate to somebody else's needs, especially if
Yes.
they're very
Right.
different than
Oh,
yours.
sure.
So, like, when I went to Italy a couple of years ago, it was with like 4 of my close girlfriends, and it's very hard for me to not be A-type and controlling when it comes to like planning a trip. But I tried to take a back seat because it was my 3rd time in Italy and it was some of theirs first time. So I was like, you guys tell me what you want to do, and then I will just like go do it, because it's not fair for me, who's been here more than once, to be like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the Trevi Fountain.
Yeah,
I'm
like,
not,
I'm not going to the Travelin. I mean, I didn't go to the Vatican. I let them go without me. But, like, you know, most things also, if I've been somewhere 10 years ago, I don't remember a lot anymore, you know? It's like, I go, my goal every year is 3 new countries, 1 new state. So, like, I'm constantly absorbing things, and then something that happened 10 years ago is almost, like, out of mind, you know? So it's like relearning it when you go to a country again, and, like, remembering the history or whatever the situation is. And things are constantly changing.
It's just the whole thing is unbelievable that you would do any of it.
Yeah,
We were in France, and one of the street, you know, there were cobblestones. Like,
Yeah.
that's what the roads are made out
Yeah.
of. And I was like, well, just
Munchmoth.
fuck this entire place. We can't pave this shit. And everyone's like, look how beautiful it looks here. I'm like,
Yeah.
fucking pave it.
It's called history.
Who wants history? It's 2000. I'm like,
He's
where
like,
is
we need
it?
some blacktop here. We
That's
need
what I
that.
was like,
We need those New York
pave
black
this shit.
potholes and blacktop.
Let it
Don't
be
go
more-
to Southeast Asia or Africa.
I'm like,
if you want
why do we have
blacktop.
to be uncomfortable while we're walking?
So when I was in Kenya in last May, they were seeing some of the worst flooding that they'd seen in decades, and the roads were washing out. So I was in this safari van going down these highways. I'll use the term kind of loosely. A lot of it is dirt roads, you know, and the grounds were washed out. So the truck, literally, if you looked forward, we looked like we were tilting all the way to one side because the roads were so uneven, and there were just like locals out there with, you know, axes and shovels and all this stuff, breaking up the ground and trying to re-smooth it out. So it's like, sometimes you don't know. I mean, they had such massive flooding that, like, if we would have gone a week before, I don't know if we would have been able to go.
Yeah.
And that's like crazy.
I'm just not well adjusted.
I think all of this travel has made me well adjusted, because I would say that I was a much more hot-headed and less tolerant person when, like, 20 years ago than I am now, from like just constantly putting myself into positions where I'm like, all right, well, I have to like figure this out, because I'm, you know, not somewhere where I can expect things to be like my home.
Yeah.
But I like that, because I feel like it's just made me a more intelligent, more accepting, broader person in general, you know?
Yeah, I don't want to accept shit.
I think also what I'm hearing is there's a difference between traveling and vacationing.
Yes.
Oh, well, yes, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And not to be
I
a snob, but I mean, there is a difference.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, yeah, it is. And I
know.
think also, like, what I'm hearing is like, you know, we're coming from a place of privilege too.
Yes.
You know, and what we're able to experience and how much you can grow.
Yeah.
You know, like even just leaving your, just like, you know, just. I remember just going to New York City by myself with my brother or my friends. You know,
Sure.
that was like a big deal. So
And it is a big deal,
I
you
guess
know?
we're recommending to our folks there, like, it's okay to explore.
Yeah,
We'd
I
rather
think
be
that's what it is.
as adventurous as Tianna, but
No, sure, but I feel
definitely-
like...
To our listeners, it's okay to explore. It is also okay not to explore.
But you should explore, even if it's just your own backyard. Because, like,
Yeah.
I try to do that with the city, too, is, like, I forget sometimes. Like, I fly to all these countries,
Yeah.
go to all these places, and then I hadn't been to the Statue of Liberty,
I know,
you know,
yeah.
until, like, 10 years ago. And it's just, like, you constantly take for granted what's in your backyard when people are traveling all over the world
just
to
to come
come
to our
backyard. And,
Well, nobody hates New York City more than people that live in New York.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
I don't
that's
think we hate New York City. I just we don't want to go to.
I think we're just intolerant. Like, New Yorkers are intolerant. We like to complain about a lot of things. Like, well,
Yeah.
because things are inconvenient. And I think it's like what you just said before. It's like, once you go places and you realize that sometimes your problems are not problems.
Yeah, you got a
know?
slice of humble pie.
Yeah, you do. And I think, like, that's another thing that has made me a compassionate and understanding person is, like, I am not rich by any standards in the U.S., but I am rich by the standards of a lot of the rest of the world. And I think, like, when you understand that, like, you get mad about things that don't matter, and you see people who have a rice patty and no shoes and seem like the happiest people in the world, that maybe you need to, like, kind of reevaluate the things that have set you.
Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
What the?
For an hour, my phone had to get taken in to fix I dropped my phone in Arizona and cracked the screen. And then I had to drop my phone off and didn't have it for like half a day. And I was like, I can't talk to anyone. And it's like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter.
I feel like Sam Kinison in the World Hunger bit, where he's like, well, then move to where the food is, and then you won't be hungry. Like, that's how I feel about it.
I mean, that's true, but also not accessible for most people to pick up and leave where they are.
I know.
And,
I'm very ethnocentric.
Yeah, I can see that. In
USA. Like, that's my life. That's what I like.
And that's also why people come here.
Yeah.
That's why we have influxes of immigrants, because we have this promise and this sort of reputation for being a place that you can come with nothing and have more. And there are a lot of countries in this world that just don't have access to that, don't have the capability to just go get a job at McDonald's and at least earn something. So I think that's like something to take into consideration when we think about politics or like, geopolitical spectrum, because everybody's lives are incredibly different, and unless you've been to a country, you don't truly know how those people think or feel or live. I think it's like just looking at what's going on in Gaza and in Palestine. If you listen to just what you see on the news, you're not getting a full spectrum of what it's like to be Palestinian or to be Israeli. So it's like I think it would do people good to educate themselves a little bit more on
I
the
couldn't
world.
explain any of what's happening in that area of the world. I know people are like, people are getting killed, and that's bad. I'm like, yeah, that is bad. You probably shouldn't do that. But I couldn't say the good guy. I don't know who the villain is in that story. I don't know who's in the right.
We don't have the time to get into the
absolutely.
Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
I also don't have the desire to learn it. That's where I'm at.
I love learning stuff like that because I think it helps me, especially when I'm traveling, understand dynamics. Like we were talking about before, when you're going to a country, like how are they going to react to American? Sometimes they also expect you to react negatively. I was having beautiful conversations with Jordanians about the conflict that was going on, because they border Israel and Palestine. And it's so interesting to see how their perspective is, and they're kind of living in it. They're living on the border of a war. And a lot of Jordanians are Palestinians. So obviously they do feel some type of way about it, but their ideas and their way of thinking about peace and the way they talk about Israelis is not the way that, like, I feel like the Western news makes Middle Easterners look. And I think it's just to keep that in mind when we're looking at a conflict that we don't have any real idea about, right? Because even just reading a bunch of books on the conflict is never going to really teach you anything until you talk to people who are from there, or experience it yourself.
No question. But Tianna, I gotta say, absolutely sensational. Definitely an expert in her field of work, and we gotta have you back on the show for other stuff, because Tianna also has she's also well read. She also has read dozens of books, so that's why she's so articulate and speaks well.
I also love Marvel. I also love movies.
And she is well equipped. So Tianna, where can folks follow your Instagram, your Facebook, any kind of business page, anywhere people can find you, your blog and all that?
Sure. My blog is the Passport Chronicles. So it's thepassportchronicles.com. And that's Chronicles with an S. I think there's a Passport Chronicle, so don't go to theirs. And then,
fuck those guys.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, but fuck him. He might not even be running anymore, but I remember when I got the domain, that's what I had to pick. But and then on Instagram, I'm my name, so at Tianna Grata. I don't really have a Facebook page anymore, and I don't use Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So it's just mostly those two are my big. Instagram's my big.
Cool.
Those are my plugs.
So folks, definitely follow Tianna, and she writes really well as well too. But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll see you in the world. Same time, same table.
Have a good one.
Boys and girls, lunchtime is over. For more information, visit their website at coolkidslunchtable.podbean.com. Follow the boys on all social media platforms. Just search Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast. Now get to class before you get detention.